Have you ever driven home from a meeting, a party, some kind of get together where someone threw out some kind of quip, a verbal challenge to you, and you delivered the most brilliant response of your life to an empty car? Or maybe you were in the shower, walking the dog, maybe making dinner when it hits you. That is what I should have said. If you've ever experienced that, let me reassure you something. You're not slow. You're not awkward, and you're certainly not the only one. In fact, this happens so often that there's actually a centuries-old French phrase for it, and I'll tell you what it is in just a moment. But first, here's what I want you to know about this video. It isn't about really quick comebacks. It's about why intelligent women, women with great ideas like you, good instincts, and valuable perspectives sometimes go completely blank in the very moment we all most want to speak. Once you understand what's really at play, you're going to stop questioning your intelligence and you're going to start approaching these moments very differently. The French philosopher Denis Diderot gave this experience a name, l'esprit d'escalier. It literally means staircase wit. Imagine leaving a dinner party, walking down the staircase and suddenly thinking of the perfect response after it's far too late to say it. And he wrote about this in the 1700s. So just think about that. Brilliant people have been experiencing this frustration for centuries, which means this isn't some modern communication problem. It's just part of being human. And here's what's fascinating. Most people assume they freeze because they aren't clever enough. That's almost never the reason. The real reason is so much more interesting. It turns out when we're under social pressure, our brains have priorities, and producing the perfect comeback isn't one of them. Talking with your boss, having a difficult conversation, or someone completely catches you off guard, you know what that feels like. Your brain immediately begins evaluating the situation. Is this safe? Ooh, how should I respond? What is everybody thinking? What happens if I say the wrong thing? What happens if I say it the wrong way? For many women, that evaluation happens almost instantly. Will they sound rude? Will I damage the relationship? Am I overreacting? Should I just let it go? And sometimes it doesn't even matter what profession you're in. I mean, I was a television reporter and a television anchor, and I can remember sometimes in interviews, the person whom I was interviewing would respond in somewhat a snarky way. Might have been a politician. And I wanted to come back with some quick quip, but I didn't. And then later on, I would think of, oh, that's what I should have said. And I remember thinking, why couldn't I have thought about that maybe 30 seconds earlier? Well, now I know. And here's the interesting part. Have you ever noticed that when those perfect words finally arrive, it's usually when you're alone? You might be folding laundry, you might be taking a walk. Very often they come when I'm in the shower. Why? Because then the pressure is gone. The brain's no longer spending lots of energy scanning the room, evaluating everybody's reactions. So what happens is that your stress level drops. Suddenly, your creativity is it's like it's back online. The comeback actually didn't magically appear. It's just that your thinking had been temporarily buried under all that pressure. And I find that really reassuring because it means that your mind never really stopped working, even though it might feel like it sometimes. It simply needed some room to work. If you're enjoying this conversation, I think you're going to love my free guide, 7 Secrets to Unlock Confidence. It is filled with practical ways to become more confident without pretending to be somebody that you are not. And you will find the link in the description below. But here's what I think most people misunderstand about that entire experience. I think most people believe the problem is that they didn't think of a clever enough comeback. I got that. I understand that. But I think the real problem is what freezing causes us to believe about ourselves. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Here's what I think we've gotten wrong. We've convinced ourselves that confidence belongs to the person with the fastest comeback. It doesn't. Think about the people who truly command a room, the ones you naturally respect. They aren't always the quickest. They're the calmest. They don't always rush to fill every silence, and they don't panic when somebody challenges them. That is so important to remember, so they stay mentally available. That's a very, very different skill. Instead of asking, what is the perfect thing to say? They're thinking, what's the best response here? Those are not the same questions. And that shift changes everything. The goal isn't to become the quickest person in the room. The goal is to stay calm enough to access the intelligence you already have. I want you to think about, if you ever saw The Devil Wears Prada, think about Miranda Priestley. She is rarely the fastest person in the conversation. She's almost never emotional. She pauses. She observes. Then she responds. Now, whether or not you like the character, there is a lesson there. Calm creates authority. Now, of course, you don't need that look of condescension. Reaction weakens the response. I've watched exceptional leaders do the same thing. Someone throws out a challenging comment. Everyone else's rushes to defend themselves. The strongest leader simply says, well, that's interesting. Or they might say, tell me more. Or, and I really like this one, what makes you say that? Now, these are not what you might think of filler phrases. They are powerful because they accomplish two things. First, they buy you time. Second, they communicate confidence. People who are secure don't feel pressured to answer immediately. They think, and then they speak. Sometimes the strongest response isn't a comeback at all. Sometimes it's a thoughtful question. Sometimes it's a calm smile. Sometimes it's deciding the comment wasn't important enough to deserve your energy. That, my friend, is confidence. Now, there's one more trap I want you to avoid: the replay. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You replay the conversation over and over again. Then you imagine how impressed everybody would have been if you had delivered that perfect line. We've all done it. The replay isn't the problem. In fact, it's really normal. The brain is still processing that conversation. The problem is what we do with it. If the replay becomes evidence that we're not good enough, that we don't think quickly enough, that's a problem. But if the replay becomes a rehearsal, you grow. Take the better response you thought of, write it down, practice saying out loud, keep it, because chances are you're going to face a similar situation again. That's what actors do. It's what comedians do. It's what experienced speakers do. Very few people are naturally brilliant under pressure. Most simply have more mental reps than anyone else. They have practice. I think sometimes the people are, number one, wired differently. I mean, you think about or you read about the responses, the quick wit of Winston Churchill or Lady Astor or Robin Williams. I think sometimes they just look at things differently, they think differently, and they don't take themselves so seriously that they really evaluate how people are going to gauge their response. Number one. Number two, I think sometimes when you are in that kind of profession, especially as an actor or a comedian, they are creating a muscle. Think about how many comedians become comedians because they weren't popular. They couldn't get the girls, or people put them down, or they were bullied until they kind of found their funny bone. And then when they could make people laugh, they became more popular, and they really began to exercise that muscle. So they made those reps over and over again. And I want you to leave with one final thought. The next time you're driving home and the perfect response suddenly pops into your head, don't treat it as proof that you failed. Treat it as proof that your brain never stopped working. The words were there all along. They were simply waiting for the pressure to get out of the way. So stop judging yourself for not being the quickest person in the room. Instead, become the woman who stays calm enough to think clearly while everyone else is reacting. Because the smartest woman in the room isn't always the fastest. She's the one who can still think when the pressure is on. And if you've ever wondered why you froze in the first place and how to make sure it happens less often, I think you're going to enjoy the video that's on your screen right now. I'll see you there.